Hi, everybody. I'm very happy to welcoming you at our third talk of the young section of the World Council for Psychotherapy. And our today's guest is Professor Roberto Opazo Castro from Chile. Bienvenido, querido profesor. Did I tell it right? I'm very happy to have you here. And also, I'm very happy to have you guys. We have already different continent and countries here attending. Like I see that we have our colleagues from Balkan region, a colleague from New York, and also a few from Russia, and there are going to be more. Everybody is have a possibility to ask a question. You can show me your hand, and then I'm going to switch on your microphone, and then you can ask your question. Or if you want to ask the question with your voice, you can also write into the chat, and then in a good moment, I'm going to read your question. I would like to start. Oh, Andres is also online from Mexico. Perfect. We are in a very good company today. And I would like to start with our kind of the already traditional question. Roberto, please tell us why psychotherapy as a profession?
Well, first of all, I would like to say hello to everyone. I'm very pleased to be here. It's a new experience for me to be online in this kind of experience. So thank you for being with me. And thank you to the World Council for the invitation. Beyond that, the question is, why psychotherapy? Why me and psychotherapy? When I was at high school, I wasn't a very good student. I didn't like to study. I liked to go on bicycle, to play soccer, to go to have dinner and talks with friends, to go to the movies, to go everywhere and do anything but study. When I came out from school, I began to study to be an engineer because my father wanted that I was an engineer. I was an only son, and I didn't care at all to be this or to be that. I was very young, so I wasn't aware of what I was doing. After my first year at the university, I approved with some problems, but I approved. And then we moved to the States for 1 year. My family came to the States for 1 year.
Sorry,
so
Roberto.
I came back to Chile and I began psychology. When I began psychology, I was not aware of what it meant. But as time went by, I began to love some issues. I began to feel connected with knowledge in terms of human knowledge. And then I began to see patients, and I, after all, began to fall in love with knowledge and with patients. And that's why I began to study and then to study, and I began to fall in love to study. You know, what was incredible for me if you compare with my years at high school. So now I can say, after a long life, that I studied a lot, because I love what I was studying. And well, that's why this profession is so important for me. And I think I was lucky of becoming a psychologist, because that's the exact profession I should have.
Roberto, for how many years you are practicing as a psychotherapist already?
Well, my clinical practice is about 45 years. And experience, I want to comment that, you know, experience doesn't work just because we have the experience. It depends on how you process the experience to become more useful or not, And I think that as time went by, I've been getting close to the experience each time in a better way. That's what I think is my wishful thinking. But 45 years are a lot, but in terms of the quality of those years is the most important issue.
There is more than 300 different approaches on psychotherapy. Why did you decide to create your own approach?
Well, let me talk a little bit more about my little history. Mm-hmm. When I came out from the university, I began my formation as a psychoanalyst. Very good student, but I was very critical, increasingly critical towards psychoanalysis. So after 5 years, I decided to step away from psychoanalysis in a very friendly attitude. They were very nice toward me, but I didn't share the theory and most of the practice. So it wasn't possible for me to remain doing that. On that time, I had a talk with some friends, and we decided to study together, to have a clinic together, and we start to study for many years. And studying, we wanted to know what works in therapy, what doesn't, and what kind of approach was closer to our way of thinking. And we reached the conclusion that no approach is much better than other. They are more or less even. It was a conclusion of Lubotsky in 1975, and we shared that one. So if many approaches reach the same results in front of patients, the question is why? And the answer is because they are less than what they think. The results are a consequence of common factors, not specific contributions from each approach. We also reached the conclusion that each approach makes a contribution, but less than what they think. So if you get close to psychoanalysis or to cognitive approach or to humanist approach, I could say now that they are okay, they are valid, more or less in 8% of what they propose, of what they assert, what they proposed. And the other 93% is obviously not accurate, is more or less mistake. So what we need to do is to identify what is valid, what is not, to define what is valid knowledge, to detect valid knowledge, to rescue it, and then to make a coherent whole out of all this. Integration for me is to make a coherent whole out of connecting different valid parts, not parts. Mm-hmm. And valid is knowledge that makes a contribution to prediction and change. Valid knowledge in psychotherapy is knowledge in action, not just looking knowledge, So we made a proposal in 1983 that was an integrative theory that I proposed to my partners in our group, and they were fascinated in 1983 with this integrative theory. It's an old one, 1983. And then we organized everything around this theory. And this theory meant to integrate valid knowledge, not approaches, not authors, because they are a combination of accurate knowledge, valid knowledge, and many mistakes. And what we wanted to integrate is just valid knowledge. But when we do that, we, I think, make an important contribution because nobody does it, you know. And the challenge is to reach that knowledge, to rescue that knowledge, to identify that knowledge, and then to integrate it, and then to apply in an integrative psychotherapy. And that's our proposal. And it's quite different from any existing approach. And I think, we think, it's the best way of getting close to the psychotherapy today at the beginning of the 21st century.
And it looks that there is a lot of valid knowledge in psychotherapy, because I just hold your book in my hand and it's so huge. You can really heal people with this. I mean, look at this. I can work out with this book. It looks like there is a lot of valid knowledge in different psychotherapeutic approaches.
Yes, that's right. Because in this book, I read, in the bibliography is more than 4,000 authors, you know. Mm-hmm. So that means to watch, to take a look on many research coming from everywhere. And yes, you're right. There is valid knowledge inside psychoanalysis, inside cognitive approach, inside humanistic, inside systemic. And if you take the valid contributions from all of them, you can build up a better approach, because it's an approach built upon just valid knowledge. I would like to emphasize is that if we integrate valid knowledge, we have to know what is valid knowledge. We have to have an open mind to see everywhere, you know, where valid knowledge could stay, could remain. So we are very grateful to those authors or those approaches that make valid contributions. I admire Freud, Beck, Skinner, Pavlov, but I'm also grateful to them because of the valid knowledge they have given to us, you know. I don't admire the whole approach, but the very important part they are giving to us, you know, valid knowledge. And well, this book, the book this book, you know, the book you just show us, yes, this book has been assessed as a very good one. Some say it is, well, it's almost absurd, you know, but some say that is the best book in psychotherapy ever written, which I say is absurd, but something good has to be in the book to say that, you know. But the merit of the book is not mine. What I'm doing is to connect what many other people has discovered, and to rescue and to integrate and to apply. My work is important because, of course, I'm using the history of psychotherapy in a very constructive way.
So it means, since how many years you are practicing this kind of integrative approach in psychotherapy?
I think we can talk about integrative psychotherapy, our way of doing that, since 1990, maybe. The model was proposed in 1983, but we built up a psychotherapy after that. So maybe in 1990.
So it means that this approach is almost as old as the most of our colleagues right here are. Like,
yes,
it's about
and
30
maybe
years old.
older also. Maybe
Yeah,
older.
older than some of us. Yeah.
Yeah.
What was the reaction on this new approach? How did the international classical psychotherapeutic society reacted to your ideas?
I think it's good and not so good, depending on many things. Many people have a bias because of their beliefs, their former beliefs. So people not young, yes, they know well what they think. They are not open mind, and they don't want to listen to us because they think that this is superficial, this is nonsense, because we can't integrate so many different approaches or authors. But when we are in front of people on in vivo presentations, the response is very good, because we have the opportunity to explain what we think, which is quite different than just knowing about integrative psychotherapy, because integrative psychotherapy may be rejected because it sounds simplistic. But when we explain what that means, it's not simplistic at all, so that's why people clap a lot. They are very accepting us, everywhere. But in vivo, not in terms of just knowing that there is an integrative.
Roberta, do you see yourself as a leader of integrative psychotherapy?
Of integrative psychotherapy, I don't want to be narcissistic, but I think I am. It's a reality, because this way of integrating is ours, not other one. Many people are integrating everything, this and that and that and this. But if you go closer to those approaches, it's a complete disorder, They take integration as this author and this other author, this approach and this other approach, without any foundation, just because it sounds nice to integrate. But it's not a very serious approach, Ours, I think, is very solid, very solid. We're very cautious. If you listen to me, it's difficult to say he's speaking nonsense. I don't speak nonsense. I'm very careful about that, But for instance, in Argentina, there was a research trying to know how many integrative psychotherapists were in Argentina. And many people said, I'm integrative. And me too, me too, me too. But when they explained what meant to them to be integrative, was a complete chaos. Everyone was integrating anything in the way they wanted, as a menu in a restaurant, So it isn't a contribution. It's another way of improving chaos, And we want to make a synthesis of valid knowledge up to date in psychotherapy, so we can open a better future, because psychotherapy is moving around and around and around. Look, in 1975, Singer and Luborsky said that the approaches get even. One pole reach the conclusions that we are even right now again. So if everyone is more or less even, it's because we're not improving too much. It's not that everybody improved the same during these 30 years. It's absurd, you know? So there is a necessity of reaching a new road, a better road. And a better road, in our opinion, means to use the valid knowledge, the existing valid knowledge, organize in a different way, to make a lecture in a different way, and to apply it in a different way. And that's our proposal.
Hi, this is Professor Zoran Milivojevic from Slovenia and Serbia. He used to be our very first guest. Hi, Zoran. Nice to see you.
Nice to meet you. Hello to everybody.
You have to switch. Nice. Hi. We have a lot of young and not so young colleagues right now. So, Roberto, what is your opinion? What is the most important personal characteristic of a psychotherapist?
Well, first of all, to have a psychological health, of course, and then a vocation for helping people, you know, a strong vocation for helping people. If you don't have that, you can be a good psychotherapist. After that, maybe the Rogerian characteristics. That means to be empathic, to be warm, to be as accepting, you know, things like that, authentic. And then to have the strength so to help patients to have energy, to be assertive, to be a good model for the patient. You know, if you are timid, you are afraid, if you're insecure, of course, it looks very bad because the patient reaches easily the conclusion, if he can't help himself, he won't help me, you know. Another thing is what Alfred Pritz said in the former talk about enjoying what you're doing. To be happy with your profession, you know, is very important. I think it's a main issue too.
Do you have a suggestion on our colleagues who would like to learn how to work in integrative psychotherapy approach? How to become an integrative psychotherapist?
Well, I think the best way is to come to Chile. Yes, I think so. It's awful, you know, because it's narcissistic, whatever you want. But I think it's real because there is nowhere a place where you can get or reach this kind of formation. To learn some Spanish and read this book is a very good idea too, you know. Yes, that book, yes, that one, yeah. You won't forget that book because of the size at least. And if you want to do it by yourself, maybe to have a critical attitude. So not buying anything. We're used to buy anything. If you look at a congress, a conference, people go to this presentation and they clap, other presentation and they clap. They clap everything. They don't. Many people don't have critical thinking. So if we buy everything, we're knowing nothing. That's it, you know. So if you use valid knowledge and you reject non-valid knowledge, is a way of getting closer to our way of integrating.
Thank you very much for this answer. Colleagues, I'm inviting you to ask your question. Sebastian, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I have a question. Thinking about the future of psychotherapy, do you feel optimistic or do you feel pessimistic about the future? Do you feel like this whole fragmented, there are like these islands of knowledge that are sort of disconnected, are going to converge in the future? Are we moving towards like a more widely accepted theory, or are people just too stubborn? Are just people are not going to accept integration? What do you think? Do you feel pessimistic or optimistic about it?
I think the question is very important because to predict what is going to happen is not easy, but we have some ways of doing it. I think it's not probable that many people around the world say this new way of thinking, this integrative approach is better, and we're going to walk on this road. Not many people, but some people, yes. And what is important is that these people, maybe few or not so few, reach better results in front of patients. So that's the most important thing of all, because all our knowledge has the target, the goal of helping the patients in a better way. If we can demonstrate that this way is better than doing some other thing, we're losing our time, you know? We have no future as the other ones have no future too. Veronica, my wife, has completed a research about the last 20 years of our institute applying our integrative psychotherapy. And the results are very positive and very optimistic. But I want to be cautious because it's very easy to see better results than the existing one. Any research has the trend on that direction. The allegiance effect means that you get results better than the existing one because of your own beliefs. You know, you have a bias to see better results than the existing ones. So if everybody has this trend, we want to be cautious to slow down our own trend and to be careful about not saying we have marvelous results if we don't have a solid position for having this assertion. So to be cautious is a better attitude, but we have good signs, very good signs.
Regarding young psychotherapists, what would be the main message regarding ethical practice?
Okay. Well, I think that ethical practice means a lot, you know, many different issues. Of course, to be honest, to be correct, to respect the patient's beliefs in terms of religion, in terms of political issues. And of course, the other almost evident thing is that you have to have a professional connection with the patient, not a too friendly one, of course, not a romantic one. So you have to be careful of all that, you know, to be very well located in terms of attitudes, being warm, being human, being close to the patient, but not missing feelings with romantic feelings and with a way of being narcissistic, so the patient admires you and to be very prone to get admiration from the patient. All that is very important. But when you have a clinical practice with these guiding attitudes, you automatically begin to do that without any problem. You know, I don't have any problems of this kind. Not because of me, because of my patient. My patients don't have any problems with ethical issues with me, and I think that is not important for me. Not because it's not important, because it doesn't happen. You know, that's different. I don't have any ethical problem because using these guidelines, the results are very good.
We have one more question from Andres from Mexican. Is it better to have more experience as a therapist or deep knowledge in theory? What is more important? To have more experience, practical experience, or to have a deep knowledge, theoretical knowledge?
I think that if you begin with a good theoretical model, you're going to improve a lot the practice. If you have just practice without a good theoretical model, what you are doing is to trust common factors. So you can reach the results, the modest results common factors can provide, you know, if you want to do more than that. Because our enemies are common factors and placebo effect. We should go over that, you know, because just to use placebo or just to be hand by hand with common factors is not enough for patients. So if we want to do a better psychotherapy, we have to have the knowledge that leads on that direction. I think it's better to have a very good theory, first of all, and then begin to practice. So, few practice, but good theory is better than a long practice without a good theory. That's my opinion.
We have one more question from Milena. Milena, please. Okay.
Roberto, you were saying that we should integrate only valid knowledge.
Repeat, please.
I'm asking, what is the criteria? How do we know which knowledge is valid and which is not?
Look, very good question. We use 3 roads for that. The first one is empirical evidence. The second one is clinical experience. And the third one is our own life day by day. If the 3 roads are consistent, knowledge is more valid. We consider valid that knowledge that is a contribution to prediction and change. I want to show you with an example that is very clear. When we say self-statements, negative self-statements, self-dialogues, produce depressive mood, we can take people, 30 people in this group, 30 people in the other group. In this group, they say to themselves negative self-statements, and the other one do whatever, but they don't say negative statements. After this, we assess again the mood, and the people who said to themselves negative messages or dialogues, self-dialogues, are more depressive than the other group. That means that when people, patients, say to themselves negative self-statements, they are producing a percentage of depressive mood. That's a demonstration, you know. You're demonstrating that self-statements are a cause, one of the causes of depressive mood. You can predict that if the patient is saying to himself negative messages, he's making a contribution to his own depressive mood. And if you remove those self-statements, you're going to remove at least a part of the depressive mood. And that's a demonstration in terms of prediction and change. Prediction, self-statements will produce depressive mood. And change, if you remove negative self-statements, you are removing a part, at least a part of depressive mood. That's a way of giving an example of that, you know.
Mm-hmm. As far I know your paradigm of the psychotherapy, you are seeing patients and also the human being not just through the paradigm of biopsychosocial understanding, but you're also seeing his in the you're also trying to understand the meaning of the request in an unconscious way.
Let me explain you for a little while.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Our theory asserts that there are 6 main paradigms working on our psychological system: biology, cognitive, affective, unconscious, behavioral, and systemic. Those 6 paradigms, and connected through the self system. And the self system has 6 functions too, which means functions like being aware of, meaning, self-esteem, identity, self-organization, the meaning of life, and the way that each one is driving his own life. Those are the 6 self-functions. But at the center of everything in our approach is meaning, is the translation the patient gives to the experience, the meaning, the effective stimuli, which means the introjection of the experience, you know. And on this meaning can be influenced by biology, by cognitions, by affection, and by unconscious processes, what you were asking. Of course, we are quite open to unconscious influences, but also to affective influences, to cognitive influence, to biological influence, to environmental influences, and to systemic influence also, you know. And what a main other issue are cultural influences that influence meanings, but the meaning in this culture is different than the meaning in this other culture. And in terms of meaning, I think I want to tell everyone this concept. There are 2 ways of meanings: nomothetic meanings and ideographic meanings. Some meanings are common to human beings. For instance, an electric shock. An electric shock is bad for everyone from here to Russia, from Russia to China, and everywhere. We don't like electric shocks. But in terms of what we like, for instance, maybe some people enjoy beauty, some other enjoy most of all sex, other people enjoys a lot music. That's different, you know, that's ideographic. Each one of us has his own way of feeling pressure or enjoying, you know. So if we have these two ways of meaning, you can use common nomothetic meanings for helping patients. For instance, in vivo exposure is useful everywhere. For many patients having agoraphobia, for instance, many of them feel that the technique is useful because the meanings are common to human beings. But it's quite different than let's say, an interpretation, a clinical interpretation. A clinical interpretation has sense to one patient and not to others, you know. It's very subjective, it's very idiosyncratic, it's quite different. What I would like to say is that our approach is an integration of science and art. Science, research coming from empirical research and so on. Art in the way we connect with the patient. Professor Eysenck said that he was very good in scientific issues, but he didn't have aptitude in the artistic issues, you know. So he could never be a good psychotherapist because his way of connecting with the patient wasn't good enough. I think that the way of connecting the patient has a lot of art. And if you don't have that human art may be a good concept for that, you can be a good psychotherapist. Because this human art improves the meaning of the therapeutic experience in the inner world of the patient.
But how can you improve this human art? How can you work on it and make it better?
Well, I think that a part of it is just part of the nature of each one, you know, and other parts may be improved through teaching and practice. For instance, empathic attitudes. To be empathic is art in some way, you know. If you learn to listen is an art. To hear is one thing, to listen is another thing, it's different. And to look at the patient is an art too, because to look is one thing and to see is other thing. You know? Personal development is very important for an integrative psychotherapist, because one way of being developed is knowing yourself. If you know yourself, of course, you are going to be a better psychotherapist. That's why in our formation, the formation of our students, self-exploration in group is a common practice down here. Every one of our students has to participate in a group of personal development and self-exploration. It's not a therapeutic group, but it is very important in terms of applying psychotherapy. If you don't know yourself, you can make many mistakes without knowing that you're making the mistakes, you know, so it's very important.
Mm-hmm. We have a practical question from Dunya. Speaking about depressive patients, a very common theme with them is passivity. What is your way of dealing with passive patients?
Let me tell you about one concept we have developed is cognitive motivation, which means the patients can be aware of the usefulness of behaving. Let's say, if you do this and that, you are going to have a distraction, you are going to have an experience, we can process the experience, we can reach some conclusions, you're going to move your mood. If you remain passive, sat down on your chair at your living room, you are not going to have any experience to process. You can't have any enjoyment coming from that attitude. When the patient has an experience, the depressive patient, he moves. The processing of those experiences are very important. What it meant to you, was important for you, was positive, wasn't positive, what the translation you gave to that experience, what was your motivation. If you repeat the experience, are you going to enjoy more? What was awful about the experience? What you didn't like about that, you know? The task assignments are very important in depressive patients. It's very important in general. It's a very good technique, task assignments. But you have to give the task that is possible to the depressive patient. And then it's very important to process what the experience meant to the patient, not just given the task and forget about it. You know, you have to follow up what happened with the task, how good was the task, what was the prediction we can make about the possibility to have successful task, not just task, you know. That's it. And so you have, and then you have another thing. Patient may be in a so bad mood that he doesn't want to move a finger. In such a case, maybe we need medication. If the depressive patient is too depressive, he is not there is no possible psychotherapy. So there is a mood that is good enough for psychotherapy, but a bad mood that doesn't permit to make a good psychotherapy.
Roberto, maybe there are some questions you are wondering yourself why we are still doesn't ask you them.
Yes, maybe a good question would be how complex is to be an integrative psychotherapy. Some people say that to know about psychoanalysis or about cognition is so complicated that you need your whole life just to know something about cognition or just to know something about psychoanalysis. Not the whole psychoanalysis, the whole cognitive approach or the whole humanistic approach, but the valid knowledge coming from them, which is a pity, but is not so much. And if we work with this valid knowledge and this one and this other one, it's not too many, but it is possible to manage it in a proper way, not so complicated as it may seem. And it looks this way, you know, and maybe I can explain this. What is better? To invest your whole life studying psychoanalysis with so many mistakes involved, or your whole life studying cognition with so many mistakes involved there, or to use your life using the valid knowledge coming from here and there and there and there. Of course, I think it's better to do the last one. And if you want to comprehend human beings are not just unconscious, not just cognitions, not just feelings, not just family systems. We are all of them. And if we are all of them and more than that, if we want to be good psychotherapists, we should have a theory able to reach human beings in a complete sense, not just a part of each human being. That's very important.
This was very wise words.
Thank you very much.
So we have to ask ourselves a question: is our profession or the way we want to live our professional life is about to learn everything about philosophy of psychoanalysis, or we want to be successful and helpful as a psychotherapy, as an instrument, or as a psychotherapist, and use everything we could use in our daily practice? But what is the glue what the integrative psychotherapists use to connect all that treasures valid treasures from different approaches?
Well, I think it's our supra-paradigmatic model, you know. When any one of you get closer to our approach, soon you'll reach our supra-paradigmatic model, which is a theory that connects all this. You don't have parts apart. You have parts connected in a whole and in a coherent way. And this way, this supra-paradigmatic way, is a guiding influence in clinical practice. It's a very practical theory. It's not just a theory among the stars, you know, it's a theory connected with Earth and with patients and with valid knowledge and with clinical practice. It's well, that's why the book exists, because it explains the theory. And the theory is founded on, as I said, scientific evidence, clinical experience, and our own life. So it is a connection coming from those foundations and connected within a dynamic way. That's it. I can't explain that now because it would be a lecture, you know, and we are talking in this different way, very spontaneous and brief. We don't have the time for that. But trust me, it's a good theory, very good one.
For our colleagues who would like to learn more about supra-paradigmatic approach and your theory, I'm going to post a video from your lecture you gave in Moscow this February. It was a lecture in the frame of the collection of lecture from international teachers welcoming the World Congress in Russia. World Congress for Psychotherapy is going to take part in Russia in 2 years, 2020.
Yes.
Roberto, we have one more question from Andrea. Beside psychoanalysis, what are the other modalities that you can say that influence you the most, and why these modalities?
Look, from psychoanalysis, we went to cognitive behavioral approach. We studied a lot about that. But then we began to study everything. So we studied about biology, we studied about cognitions, we studied about affection, we studied about, of course, psychoanalysis, unconscious, we studied systemic approach. Now, I don't have a main one. I wouldn't say psychoanalysis was more important or cognition was more important. I think everything was important in terms of giving me the opportunity to detect valid knowledge coming from each one of them. The humanistic approach is important always because of the role of affection. Since our affective mood, our motivation, and our way of enjoying life are so important, the humanistic approach is important always, as it is very important the psychoanalysis in terms of the influences coming from unconscious processes, but also in terms of biology. Biology is so important. We never emphasize, not never, but very seldom emphasize biology, being biology so important in terms of disposals. We are prone to this kind of maladjustment, not to other ones. Each one of us has a trend to have some problems and a trend to have not other problems. This is very important in terms of what biology is meaning to each one of us.
Roberto, you have such a global, international professional experience. You has been invited to speak at the conferences and congresses for psychotherapy all over the world. What is your personal opinion about the professional societies in different countries? And are there some countries by them you have a feeling that they do develop in the right way? Like the generation before our generation was much more about this old European school of psychotherapy, mono schools, and this European way of understanding the psychotherapy theory and praxis of psychotherapy. Now, the past years, it was much more about this kind of American school of behavioral therapy and psychological approaches. Where cultural and ethnical is the psychotherapy going right now, according to your personal opinion and experience?
First of all, I would say that looking around the world, I would say that psychotherapists everywhere are very clever and they're motivated to help patients. That's everywhere. In terms of some accentuations, in the States, they are very practical. So they are very practical, but a little bit simplistic. In Europe, I think they are deeper and maybe not so prone to results, to assess results. I think that everywhere the formation of the psychotherapist is not good enough. I think it's very rare to find people that is that is in a good position towards psychotherapy. People who helps patients everywhere, but because of common factors. But people in a better position to help better the patient is very rare. It's very complicated to find this kind of psychotherapist. But this is not because I'm very critical. I think it's very real. And it's not a way of speaking bad about colleagues or about our own partners. I'm very close to psychotherapists. I have very good relationships with everyone. I'm very respectful. I go to congresses, conferences from different approaches. But what I can say is that many people help patients, but because of common factors, and not many help patients beyond common factors, because they don't have the theory that can help them to do that, So if they don't have specific knowledge that can lead beyond common factors, they are not going to go beyond common factors. So what I would say is that our colleagues all around the world are resting on common factors, and that without common factors we are going not far.
Mm-hmm. Could be the reason for this that the most of the colleagues are not is that the psychotherapeutic education is not good enough or not complex enough, or just the modern theory in the monomodalities is not praxis is not based on psychotherapy research?
What I do think is that our colleagues around the world are not aware of a very deep problem we share. The problem is that we are writing over common factors. So each one says, my patient improves because of my psychoanalytic approach. The other one says, my patients improve because of my cognitive approach. The other one says, my patient improves because of my humanistic approach. The patients are improving because of common factors, not because of the approach. Mm-hmm. But since each approach says is doing well because of their beliefs, they're doing the same and they have no reason to change. And they're comfortable with the results coming from common factors, which is not enough. And those results are leading nowhere but to the place we already have. We can't go beyond that. And our challenge is to go strongly beyond that. Because if we don't do that, we have the problem that sometimes some research shows the teachers from Harvard or from Oxford or from wherever can have a better therapeutic results than psychotherapists because of common factors. Yeah. If there is a very charismatic teacher in front of a patient, may have better results than a psychotherapist. Why? Because he makes a better use of common factors. That's a shame, you know, that's a shame. So that's because we as a profession are not two professionals. And that's why what I say is that our challenge is to go far beyond common factors and far beyond placebo effects. If we're not able to do that, we don't have a profession.
And to do this, we have to learn Spanish and go to Chile?
Yes, as soon as possible. As soon as possible.
Well,
buy the tickets right now.
Me personally, it's about to go.
Katia, listen to me. Yeah. Of course, we are beginning this. We are seeding, you know. So maybe this is the first step down here. We need other step. I don't know how to make those steps, but we should do that, because if we are realistic, this way of thinking looks well. This way of thinking looks better. But maybe somebody comes with a better idea than mine. Of course, I don't say this is the final truth, not at all. But if you compare what I've been saying in this conference, in this presentation, with the alternatives, for many of you with a hand on your heart, you would say, maybe he's truth, maybe he's right.
Thank you. So, well, me personally is going to Chile to learn from me at end of November this year, and I'm also inviting all the colleagues to do the same. Also, if you're not Spanish speaking, I mean, all of us just is about to start learning Spanish right now. To, as you said before, to read your book. But
Okay.
you're all invited to join our group because Roberto was so nice to invite us, the colleagues from Russia and from in our countries, to visit your center in Santiago de Chile and learn more about your approach you're using already since more than 30 years. Roberto, I would invite you to give your last advice to young psychotherapists. And then I will invite everybody else to, if you want to say something and share your experience. Go ahead.
Okay. First of all, I want to thank everyone for listening to me. Maybe my message may look narcissistic or prepotent or things like that. I don't want at all to be this way. As I told you, I want most of all to receive critique and to be open-minded and to have a critical thinking within myself. So what I don't want is to look as the owner of the final truth. After that, I invite you to be critical towards psychotherapy. We're all psychotherapists. We want the best for psychotherapy, and the best is to improve. The best is not to be self-acceptant, clapping ourselves, saying that psychotherapy is the best and that we are the best, because it's not true. We have the challenge to build up a real, better psychotherapy. If we don't do that, we won't go any further. That's what I would like to say to young people, and to be aware of all this, because it's so easy to accept anything. The psychological mind is so complex that anything can be said, and it's very difficult to say that's false. The way of identifying mistakes needs a very critical thinking, and that's my main invitation.
Thank you very much, Roberto. I am happy to announce that you are the honorary guest of the 9th World Congress for Psychotherapy taking place in July 2020 in Russia. I will be very happy to have you here and learn more about your concept, and also to realize how it's going to develop through all these critical reviews now are going to come to your book, and also after our talk, and how it's going to develop, because it's moving all the time. And also I had the pleasure to translate your lecture in February in Moscow, and since then we met in Mexico, and I'm seeing all the time how does you and your colleagues are in this endless moving and in this critical position and trying to pick the best, the sweetest berries from all different approaches, and this is very, very inspiring for most of us.
Thank you very much, Katia.
We are going to see, thank you one more time, dear professor, and we are going to see each other in August. I would like to remind you that our international talks are taking place every first Saturday in the month, and our next guest is going to be our colleague from America. Thank you very much for being a part of this global project, and see you soon.